Thanks, Anderson. We are on location at St. Stephen's Community Church, United Church of Christ. And we thank you for joining in with us at this time. The primary mission of Serenity is to share with you information and inspiration. If we are to have peace on earth and goodwill, it must first begin with individuals having peace and goodwill within. Please join me in reciting the Serenity Prayer for which this show is named. And it is as follows: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. On this gracious occasion, we have here at St. Stephen's, the program that we are calling the Reverend and the Rabbi. An awesome program that has been organized by our own Deacon Pat, for which we are grateful. She brought the Rabbi and I together several months ago, and it has been an awesome developing relationship. We have been able to bounce things off of the wall. Well, not really off of the wall. We've had a good time sharing, and tonight the congregation has come from Kahilat, Israel. Did I get that right? Kahilat, Israel to St. Stephen's. The first time we were at Kahilat, Israel, and this is the second, probably about 4 times that we will be together. The first time that we were together, we talked about Jewish and Christian relationships, our understanding of text, God, Jesus, and the gospel, diversity, race, and culture, welcoming, bridging the gap between Jewish and African American cultures.
That was the first 10 minutes.
That was the first 10 minutes. And tonight we are going to continue that conversation, and we welcome you to ask your questions at will, and we will be looking forward to some exciting dialogue and hope to have a date for our 3rd one. Now, we do have a date that we want to remind the folks at St. Stephen's that we have been invited to Kahilat, Israel on the 18th of January.
The 18th of January.
That is on a Friday, 6:15, and we are going to have a joint Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. Isn't that awesome? And we're inviting the bell choir, and we are inviting the St. Stephen's Voices of Praise, and we are inviting the dancers, and we're
on site.
Yes, the contemporary choir. We're just going to have a great time on that evening.
And I just found out we're inviting our school too, so our children will be there.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. And this is a first of many efforts that we are hoping that the 2 congregations will continually be developing a relationship one with the other as the Rabbi and I continue to develop a relationship together. I find this just to be an awesome opportunity, Rabbi. Absolutely awesome. So where do we go from here? Do we do a little kind of a brief catch-up for those who were unable to make the first session? You want to do that, or?
I think you did a wonderful summary already.
Okay, all right. I found it very interesting. This is not the first time. This is our second taping of the program, and when we had the tape before, we were talking about the slavery Holocaust and the Jewish Holocaust. And one of the comments, Rabbi, that you had made was that the perpetrators, or the descendants of the perpetrators of the Jewish Holocaust, were experiencing some anxiety, is
trauma,
that trauma?
Yes.
As well as maybe some of the descendants of the victims of the Holocaust. And I had made the comment that it didn't seem to me that it seemed to me that we needed a similar sensitivity of the former slaveholders as the perpetrators, and the descendants of the slaves that probably should be sharing some trauma, even though we are not have not the capacity to reach back to exactly where we came from in the motherland.
No, there's a lot that's packed into what you just said. I mean, certainly, modern Germany, probably since the early 60s or so, has gone through a very intense period of self-reflection. Now, admittedly, it was not the generation of the perpetrators, it was the next generation who looked at their parents, looked at their history and the legacy, and looking in the mirror were horrified, and have forced the issue. And so Germany, for the last 30, 40 years, has just been inundated with media, with reenactment, with historical study of what happened, with Jewish-German exchange, with revival of Jewish culture within Germany. It's been a remarkable process, still in many ways a long way to go, but it has forced the issue of acknowledgement in the perpetrator society, and I think you're absolutely right that in the society of the descendants of the slaveholders, as far as I know, there's been nothing of the kind. This level of acknowledgement, and I want to be careful. You know, it's since my family and most of the people in the Jewish community, you know, we were somewhere else when this was all going on. Our hands are clean, so it's very easy to point fingers. But it's. I would agree with you that I think this would be a very important and transforming process for all involved.
One of the things that we do here at St. Stephen's, and we certainly would invite the Jewish community to join us, is we have Kwanzaa. As a matter of fact, St. Stephen's Community Church, United Church of Christ, is known for the church in the city that has Kwanzaa services. Normally we do them twice a year, at the very beginning of Kwanzaa and at the very end of Kwanzaa. This year we're only going to do one day, and we'll talk about all the 7 days of Kwanzaa. And the next time that we gather, we can go through the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, or if not, the next time we gather, maybe one of our shows in December can be on the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. And even though those are not like the 10 Commandments or like the 2 greater commandments in the post-Jewish text or the post-Hebrew text, they do have a cadence about them that would be very helpful for the community at large, you know, to be aware of. For an example, Nia, one of the principles of Kwanzaa, is purpose. And I don't know all 7 of them by memory, but that's just an example of how the 7 principles are tied into a course of action or a sense of direction.
Right. Now, my understanding is that Kwanzaa was developed in the United States.
That is correct.
There was one gentleman who basically had done research on African traditions and had basically recreated a holiday to evoke the highest values of the host cultures.
That's correct.
Yes. Where, of course, the African American community has come from such a diversity of African cultures that I wonder, did he just draw on one specific culture, or did?
I do not know. I have forgotten that history. I did read it, but I have forgotten the history. What I do know is, as we said once before, that many of us are unable to go like Alex Haley went and identify a specific community, a specific tribe.
That would be extremely difficult.
And expensive. But there is a way, and I hope it's not a money-making thing, but there is a way that they can take your blood.
DNA testing?
DNA testing.
Interesting.
And get you pretty close to the country in Africa from which you probably could have come. I suspect I've been to Ghana, and I've been to the slave castles up the coast from Ghana. And I just had this feeling that that's where my ancestry is. And one of these days, as I shared with you before, I went down to the Varner plantation. My dad was the son of a slave, which means my grandmother on my father's side, my father's mother was a slave, grew up on the slave farm, plantation just outside of Sunnyside, Georgia, which is about 45 miles southwest of Atlanta, Georgia. But one of these days I'm going to go down there and see if they still have the records.
Right. Yeah, we were talking, I think it was on the last TV broadcast, about genealogy, which to Jewish community, again, the immigrant generation, people who came over from Russian Empire, from Eastern Europe around the turn of the 20th century, most of that generation, they didn't want to talk about it. They said, yeah, it was glad to be out of there. And so it took a later generation then, those who were fortunate enough to do some oral history with their great-grandparents and whoever it was. But, mostly the later generations have had to do a lot of work going through archives, traveling in Eastern Europe. But there's been a real push, a real need to trace back that line where we came from. I can imagine that a generation that had been liberated from slavery would have had absolutely no conception and probably no desire to look back to societies where their own rulers had sold them in chains.
But don't you agree that it would be an important component to have
Absolutely.
in order to
Absolutely.
become united? I mean, do you not feel more united to the Jewish nation because of this move toward information gathering, reconciliation between perpetrator and victims? Don't you feel a sense of liberation from this experience that perhaps the African American community could experience just by having a little bit of information about from whence we really began as kings and queens and princes and princesses on the motherland?
Oh, sure. I remember that, in the 60s, the Black Power movement, and there was the interest in Africa. But as far as really, yes, systematically, going back, if the DNA information is there, to trace whatever one can to particular societies, particular villages or peoples, I think would be incredibly empowering. And Henry Louis Gates?
Henry Louis Gates is doing that.
Okay.
Say more.
Harvard University.
Yes, take the mic and say more, please.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, we don't have a TV, so you've got to educate them. Sorry, Ken.
It's archived. Some
Yeah.
court cases done, and the individuals he's talked to are absolutely stunned when he reveals to them where they're from.
And what is the name of the, do you know what the name of that?
It's slipping my mind, but if you look up Skip Gates, he has strong connections with MSU.
SKIP?
Henry Louis Gates, G-A-T-E-S, at Harvard University.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Dr. Melody, did you want to make a remark? Would you please take the mic because we are taking this? Okay. Yes, it's on. I hear you.
It is?
Yes.
I just want to say that I'm rather obsessed with the question of how the intergenerational legacy of white supremacy and racism has misformed, deformed, white imagination, spirits, hearts, and so forth. Just to give an example, I can't prove this, but I have reason to believe from family conversations that my father's father, who was raised in Birmingham, Alabama, and vicinity, my father was too, may have very likely been taken as a young child on at least one occasion to witness a lynching. as a rite of passage into white manhood, as horrific and horrible as that is to say. And I have to ask that for that child, 6 years old, 7 years old, what was split off at that moment in him? When he may have looked up into his daddy's eyes, wanting to see some mirroring of the horror he maybe was feeling as a child. I don't know, I can't know this for certain. And maybe didn't see that, but instead, you know, the photographs we see from lynchings are also horrible in the sort of carnival aspect on the faces of white people in the photographs and so forth. So, you know, I can go to libraries. My grandfather was alcoholic. He was abusive. I can go to bookstores and I can find books about the intergenerational impact of abuse, physical abuse. I can find books about the intergenerational impact of alcohol. Why is it that nothing that I know, I cannot find anything, and that's why I'm obsessed, I'm trying myself to write something about this. Why is there nothing? How could it be any less significant, the impact of perpetrating that kind of violence, racial violence, on the spirits and souls of children raised in those homes? How could that not have profound impact on those of us who are white?
You know, Melanie, I'm just thinking, there's a project I'm working with right now. This came about when I was asked to officiate at a funeral from a young man who really had great visions and ideals. He wanted to work for peace. He wanted to work for a better world, and he was profoundly depressed at the same time, and committed suicide. And we're slowly starting an initiative right now to do a forum in his honor, a memorial forum for a study of peace and human decency. And in our early discussions, we've been looking a lot at what does it take to really educate, change, inform people so that in a way that would have some impact, so that every one of us in our own little way could move a little bit more towards decency, a little bit more away from warfare and cruelty and brutality. And what seems to be coming forth in it is that it takes a kind of education that is done with a very light touch that acknowledges that we are all beneficiaries of what's going on, you know, whether it's genocide, whether it's child slavery, various forms of economic exploitation in the developing world. We are, that we recognize, not that we're doing anything cruel or anything, but that it is all part of a complex system from which we are benefiting. And not to punish ourselves, not to beat ourselves up, but to recognize that. And when I hear you say, like, why isn't that out there? We can only take so much at a time, or else the walls come up.
I think that's true, but I also think there's been a learned silence in white families, a learned obliviousness, a learned looking the other way, and I think if the healing is going to come, we have to also begin to name that.
We have to name it, yes.
Work.
We do, yeah. But I guess all I'm saying is that we have to find a way that we can present it so that the people, that those involved don't turn away, that they need to be able to stay with it and look. And that might take a little hand-holding. And I apologize for my phone, that is really tacky, but okay.
Well, we charge for that,
I know.
Oh, well, I don't see you pulling your wallet out. And it rings again. Are there other comments, questions on, yes?
Yeah.
Well, that poll that was released.
We really do need you to use the mic.
The poll that was released, the poll that was released prior to the election, quite frankly, I found immensely disturbing. That we continue to have a very divided America. And I laud your idea of hand-holding, but I don't know that a hand-holding is going to get us anywhere. Race and racial divisions
Are enormous.
continue to be the undiscussable in any significant way.
Right.
We dance around it. And I don't see the evidence that we're going to stop doing it.
Is that because it is painful? Is that because it's unbelievable? Both? I mean, how much longer do you avoid the elephant in the room? Whether it is racism or sexism or homophobia or miseducation or misrepresentation. I mean, how long what? Forever and ever, amen?
You know, I got to say that we were having a conversation at home about betrayers and the ladies.
Oh my.
And I'm thinking how the sexual issue is just as much an issue there. We were looking at how they portray us. And we were talking about people in our families where things like that had happened, but the wife at home acted as if it was not happening. And how the embarrassment of acknowledgement or coming out with all of this, how the embarrassment was just so hard for the wife to bear, and that was the thing that would make it more of a problem in their relationship than the fact that he had done something like that.
Yeah.
But as long as it was kept covered, everything is okay. You can be in denial and act like it's not there, and keep your pride, your standing among your peers, and things like that. I bet you there is some of all of that in all of these kinds of unhappy and exploitative type relationships that people have with one another, and with the victims having to somehow, and the victims may not be the victims that you originally think of, because I'm thinking, Melody, when you were talking, I was thinking of the children of the ones who were lynched. It was as horrible as it was. After they were dead, they were dead, hopefully gone to heaven or wherever, but it was painful, of course, no question about that, but their children having to see that, and part of it was done so they could see that, so they could be kept in line, you know. And so I'm thinking, you know, when all of this is out, the heartbreak that people feel when these various things come out, because we know what's right. I think we all know what's right. So we do it anyway because we're humans, I suppose. Because we need to do things that somehow advance ourselves, we think. I used to work on the same issue that you were talking about, Rabbi, in terms of the culpability of all of us in the poverty and the awful things that are happening throughout the world, whether it's sex trafficking or whatever it is. But it's a broader thing than one issue, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That we can talk in a broader, or begin to think in a broader context as to how we are all in this some kind of way, or against somebody doing something. We may not be get wrapped up in anything that may move us towards holier than thou and get us into something that points at somebody else instead of what's here.
I'd like to share that a complexity that I'm struggling with is the recognition, on the one hand, of people who have been genuinely victimized and hurt and abused, and as often as not will deny it or defend the perpetrator and the like, and the importance of connecting with the rage, connecting with one's own innocence in the specific act, that this is crucial. At the same time, recognizing that the kind of healing and reconciliation we're talking about, I strongly believe, comes at a larger level when we recognize that whatever the tendencies are that lead people to do things that create a lot of suffering, we all have those tendencies within ourselves. And that we need to recognize that. Now, those two paradigms are often in conflict. And I can kind of intellectualize it, well, this is a different stage of the process, and this is a specific, this is a general, whatever, but it's very complicated.
Part of it is getting it out like we are right now. Is reminding ourselves of the injustices that are in this country that we all have a part of, and we all do. And we'll take your question at the next segment where we need to wind this segment down, and at the top of the next segment, we will get your question and begin from there. In the meantime, we would like to thank you for joining us today. We look forward to visiting with you again and hope you will include in your daily prayers, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Until next time, Serenity. God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Until next time, Serenity.